I welcome you again to Economic Forum, where today we are discussing the role of the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare to see how it helps in the development of the economy in Zimbabwe. And we've invited none other than the Minister himself, and that's Professor Paul Mavhima. Professor Paul Mavhima, Minister, welcome to this program.
Thank you, John, and I'm very happy to be here.
It's not your first time, so we are going to be continuing with what you told us when you were appointed as a minister in this ministry. Yeah. So what really describes your role at the moment, Minister, is what you were promoting at the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair in Bulawayo. And to quote your theme, promoting inclusive public service delivery, employment promotion, efficient labor administration, and sustainable social protection services in the new normal. If you could unpack that for the viewers.
The ministry is basically three in one. There's the public service component, which deals with issues related to conditions of service of the public service. It's basically a responsibility of the Public Service Commission, but the ministry is the parent ministry which administers the various acts. So there is that aspect, and we have to make sure that our public service is efficient, is well managed, is always improving in order to serve the citizens of this country. The second aspect is the efficient labor administration. We preside over issues related to, labor.
And that's both public and private?
That's both public and private. We are in the process of amending the Labor Act right now to make sure that we protect the interests of the worker, but at the same time making sure that there's a balance so that the business people who employ labor are also protected. So there's a balance there that we have to make. But we need an efficient system where disputes are quickly resolved, where issues of freedom of association, where the registration of unions and other things like that, where national employment councils, their registration and their administration, we preside all over that. And you will understand that these labor relations are fundamental to the economic development of this country. Then the third aspect is the aspect that you referred to, which is social development. We call it social development now, not just social welfare. And social development means we have to think in terms of our less privileged citizens, not as a burden to the country, but we have to find ways in which we can capacitate them, make them contribute in different ways to the development of this country. And we cannot say we have prosperity if we are leaving some people behind.
Minister, these are some of the things that you may have pronounced when you came to Economic Forum some time ago. But the difference now is that we are in a new normal and things have not been the same.
Exactly.
I'll mention the fact that during lockdown, the public service was almost closed down because you were not working 100% to full capacity. And also, there's now rampant corruption in different sectors of the country. So maybe if you can go deeper into how different you are in making the public service more efficient, in dealing with the bloated public service and so forth. Some people are even scared, to look for public services because of the kind of reception that they get.
COVID-19 obviously caught us unaware when it came, and it has defined a new way of doing things. And we had to think on our feet on how to deal with it. We had to reduce the numbers of civil servants coming to work, but we had to maintain the same levels of service delivery for most of the part. For example, we could not we could not renege on our responsibility to provide social welfare, because the vulnerable will always want to be served. And the roles increased. The welfare roles increased, because all of a sudden those people who were fending for themselves on the streets in informal settings also had to be taken care of by government. So we really had to think on our feet. I'm happy in a way that a lot of the gaps that exist, especially in terms of service delivery in an electronic format is concerned, were exposed by COVID-19. So the investments, we now know the investments that we have to make in terms of plugging those holes and making sure that we have interactive systems, fully interactive systems of e-governance. And we have to invest a lot of resources, both human capital but also financial resources, so that we can have the equipment that we need in order to operate in the new normal. We had to garner a lot of resources in order to provide relief for those who had lost incomes as a result of COVID-19. At our peak, I think we were at about 300,000 households that were supported by government.
Minister, we'll come back to those social services that you've just started describing. But in a nutshell, before we go to the second segment, how about the stagnation that took place as a result of the lockdown? Because some offices were actually virtually closed down, and you could not deal with them virtually as such. Very briefly, how have you managed to catch up with the stagnation that took place?
We are in the process of catching up. If you look at every department of government now, they are dealing with backlogs that were a result of the lockdown. Look at passports, birth certificates, look at registration for motor vehicles. We now have to catch up, and we are in the process of catching up. But one other thing that this has taught us is that we could improve efficiencies with reduced staff levels. So there's a way in which we have also gained from the experience that we went through.
Minister, I will stop you for the time being, and we're going to continue with this when we get to our second segment. So join us in our second segment of Economic Forum, where we are discussing today with the Minister of Public Service, Labour and Social Development, Professor Paul Mavhima. Welcome to the second segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Development, how it contributes to our economic development in Zimbabwe. And we've invited the Minister, as I said, the Minister, Professor Paul Mavhima, who has outlined what the public service arm does, and also touched a little bit on the social development aspect. But back to the public service, some issues have come up in recent years. Part of the new normal, I suppose, issues of corruption, issues of lack of delivery, as it were. I mentioned earlier on in the introduction that when you are going to government offices, at times you are not sure how you are going to present yourself. You may be asked maybe to pay something for a service that is supposed to be free, that is supposed to be a public service. Yeah. So how are you dealing with those things? Because they tend to take us backwards as a country.
Yeah, the aspect of corruption, John, is not necessarily something that has come together with COVID. This has been long-standing, not only in Zimbabwe but in a lot of other countries. But this is not to make an excuse for it. In fact, we need to deal very, very deliberately and very, very harshly with public servants who engage in corruption. We can't develop under a situation where citizens are asked to pay extra for services that are rightfully theirs. We need to do a number of things about it. We need, first of all, to strengthen law enforcement around issues of corruption. But we also need to conscientize the public so that they whistleblow on corruption. We also need to strengthen our training, the mindset of our civil servants, to always think in terms of their role coming from a calling. You know, you are a student of public administration yourself. You know that it's a lifelong commitment that you make. It's another thing to say to government, you are not remunerating us well enough. There are forums for that discussion, but there's no reason whatsoever for a public servant to demand a bribe for a service that they are supposed to provide. That's the only way we can develop. So government, through its various arms, including the training, the human capital development that falls within my ministry, we have to make sure that we are fighting this scourge so that we don't derail the development that is supposed to take place.
Maybe a compliment in that regard, Minister. I've listened on radio and have some programs in different languages where the Public Service Commission is actually talking about some of these things. So it's reaching out. I also hope that the ministry has got some roadshows where you actually go to places and preach the same gospel that you have just preached here on Economic Forum.
Yeah, in actual fact, in line with the thinking of the Second Republic, which really has brought in a sense of agency to the development of this country, we are happy that we have a very dynamic Public Service Commission, and they are now designing some programs, mindset change programs, but they are also talking in terms of whistleblowing numbers where you can call and report corruption. So we have that dynamism that is taking place within the Public Service Commission, and we are very happy about that. They are also talking about training our civil servants so that they are driven by this performance culture. And once you have that performance culture, you will have less and less of the shaking and the moral hazard.
How about the bloated civil service? Is it just a song that people will sing in every country that the civil service is bloated, they need to be reduced, or it's something that you've actually dealt with? It was so maybe many years ago. And some people were actually getting paid during lockdowns and so forth. That's something that you also managed, isn't it?
Yes, but really, the whole idea of reducing the civil service starts way back as 1991 with the ISAP program, but there were also civil service reforms that were not directed by IMF, World Bank, but where we got a lot of technical assistance from the United Nations, for example. And a lot of also the programs that we came up with were also internally driven. There was retrenchment that took place across the entirety of the civil service at that particular point in time. And then you remember in 2013, we also had the World Bank coming with technical assistance to try and reduce the civil service. Is it fit for purpose in terms of size?
Okay.
That's
fit for purpose in terms of size. Yeah. Minister, I'm going to stop you there. You are just going to wind up that in the next segment. Yeah. But for now, we'll take a break. Join us in the third and final segment. Welcome to the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Development with the Minister, Professor Paul Mavhima. I just cut you short, Minister, when you were still discussing about the efficiency and the bloatedness of the public service. Very briefly on that, because we have other issues just to cover.
It's a continuous learning process. We have to always look at the civil service and say, do we have to re-engineer? Do we have to reduce the size? In some cases, you will find that in some departments, you may need to increase the numbers. As we do Pumvuza, for example, we'll need more extension workers. So it's a continuous process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the labor aspect, if you aligned the laws, you were talking earlier on in some other fora about actually some proposal to the labor laws.
Yes.
Very briefly on that as well.
We have received cabinet approval of the bill. It's now going to Parliament.
What is it called?
It's just Labour Amendment Bill. Yeah, we are amending the Labour Act.
Focusing on what?
Focusing on making sure that there's security. We are tightening up the issues of retrenchment so that when employers retrench, they pay the appropriate retrenchment packages. Those are some of the things that are in there. We are dealing with issues of reducing the possibility of child labor, for example, and making it providing deterrent sentences for people who engage in child labor.
Yes.
So there are quite a number of changes that we have introduced.
Regarding NDS1, you're also proposing a national insurance scheme, but we've got NASA. How are we doing with NASA?
Oh, we are doing extremely well. We have really addressed quite a number of the legacy issues.
And these included?
NASA was almost synonymous with corruption and pilferage of national resources, and we are closing those gaps. We are making sure that there's good governance at NASA. We are making sure that they are taking care of the welfare of the pensioners.
Yes.
We have.
How has that improved, Minister?
We have
considering the economy,
for example,
dollarization, and
yeah. For example, in December 2020, we're paying at an average of about $12, but by end of December, we'll be at $60. So you can actually see that resources are now being plowed back to benefit the pensioners. There are a number of programs that had stalled, housing programs that had stalled. We have also started a loan facility for pensioners where they get concessionary interest rates, and they can start. They can start their own small, enterprises which can enhance their standard of living. We have done bonuses in order to cushion them against inflation and erosion of their benefits.
But having said that, Minister, day in and day out, we're always hearing about looming strikes and complaints from the unions. They're not happy with some of the monies that you're giving to the workers, especially the way they are calculated. They've demanded payment in US dollars. It's something that you have not conclusively dealt with.
John, where we are coming from as a nation, almost 20 years of suboptimal performance in our economy, where we had serious currency problems, the wiping off of the Zim dollar in 2008, and then starting to rebuild slowly. The transitional stabilization program, for example, the monetary changes that had to take place, which have now led to some semblance of stability in our economy. All those were very difficult to go by. But I am glad that we are beginning to see an economic rebound. And we hope that this will be sustainable so that whatever employees are getting makes sense for both the public and private sectors. You also realize that, for example, if you look at the public service, we have been reviewing almost consistently to make sure that we are keeping pace with the erosions that are taking place. But one thing that I have to be very clear about is we cannot pay in US dollars, especially from the public sector, because we already know that we don't have a good source for us to pay. And also, this journey that we have started of reintroducing our own currency, we can't abandon it midway.
Minister, there are so many things that we can discuss regarding your ministry, and chances are that we might invite you next time. But just to give you time to explain about the current role of the voluntary organizations, there's been a lot of talk about interference by other ministries, where your own ministry is supposed to be playing a leading role with regards to governance and operations.
Yeah, we register them, we supervise them, and we make sure that they stay on the mandate that they originally give to us.
You supervise them, but they're complaining that they are also getting supervision from another master falling under a different ministry?
No, there are levels at which the supervision takes place. We do the registration and general supervision at the national level. But when they go to work in districts at the sub-national level, the provincial level has to know who is coming to do what. And this is where recently there was a controversy. There is actually a policy, a 2003 policy, that clearly stipulates what is supposed to happen in terms of coordination. No country can allow just any organization to come and do things that are in many ways national without supervising them. And we also don't want foreign organizations who then come to Zimbabwe, become conduits for money that is supposed to influence our national politics. There is no country in the world that allows that to happen.
In a few seconds, I would have wanted you to dwell in depth on this one, what you're doing in order to solve issues affecting the disabled, the elderly, women and children, just all embracing. Is the ministry really seized with some of these issues? Because those are the vulnerable sections of our society.
Yes, as far as people living with disabilities are concerned, we have just launched a new policy where we are basically outlining the services that they are entitled to.
And other vulnerables?
The other vulnerables, we have always taken care of them. By the way, as far as vulnerable children are concerned, we have just also gotten approval to change the law so that we strengthen the way in which we deal with issues of child protection. We provide quite a number of services for children, for example. Issues of BEAM. It's actually it's administered under the Ministry of Education, but it's a fund that is run by my ministry.
It's very evident, Minister, that you might be coming back on Economic Forum, because there are quite a lot of issues that we have to discuss with regards to social development as well as human capital itself. Well, I would like to thank the Minister of Public Service, Labour and Social Development, Professor Paul Mavhima, for coming on to Economic Forum, where today we're discussing various issues affecting his ministry. So until next time, this is John Masu.